All right, welcome to the second session in a hopefully ongoing series I'm calling Star Wars Torah. This is a bit of a personal exploration for me because Star Wars has kind of had a special place in my religious development. As I talked about um, in our first session, here comes another friend. Yoda was kind of my first rabbi, as I like to say. He was the first one to describe something that I understood to be a spiritual truth. And whereas we get a lot of frequently anthropomorphic God imagery from Bible and Siddur and things like that, listening to Yoda teach Luke Skywalker the Force, really prompted me to think more expansively about, ideas about God beyond the concrete and something on a deeper level. Now we're going to be taking a bit of a different approach in this shiur from the last time. Instead of comparing ideas introduced in Star Wars, ideas about the Force and things like that, to Jewish tradition, we're going to kind of map Jewish tradition onto Star Wars and see what results. So specifically, we're going to evaluate the actions of a particular character from the perspective of halacha. Now, halacha usually translated as Jewish law, but I like to interpret it or explain it much more as something like normative Jewish practice. It's the Jewish way of walking through the world. Halacha comes from a root that means to walk. So it's really sort of a way of Jewish living that it's what we're trying to describe. But it also describes a body of literature, much of which we're going to be drawing on today for our examination. So we're going to be asking the questions, how would the rabbis have evaluated this scenario or different versions of the scenario, as we'll see, and what verdict might they have reached? Oh, Larison family joining. Welcome. Hi, friends. We're just getting started. Oh, hi, Ellie. Hi, Reed. Good to see you. We're just getting started. I was just explaining that we're going to be doing something a little bit different from last time, and instead of talking about ideas from Star Wars and comparing them to ideas from Jewish tradition, we're going to be kind of taking Jewish tradition and mapping it onto Star Wars and seeing if the actions of a particular character, how they'd be evaluated by the rabbis. Oh, we still got more folks coming. Here comes Andrea.
We probably won't be able to stay for very long, but we would love to be here for the beginning.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. Hi, Andrea. Welcome. Okay, so the scene that we're going to be looking at is among the most famous, or perhaps infamous, among Star Wars fans because of controversy around the many different versions of it that appear in various Star Wars releases. So the scene is probably one you're familiar with. We'll watch it in detail, but just to set the scene for you, because we're not going to rewatch the whole movie, obviously. In Star Wars A New Hope, Luke and Obi-Wan enter the Mos Eisley Cantina. They're looking to hire a ship to take them to Alderaan, and there they meet Han Solo. Han introduces himself as the captain of the Millennium Falcon and agrees them to transport them to Alderaan for the price of 17,000 credits. They plan to meet up again in Docking Bay 94 when Imperial stormtroopers show up in the cantina. Obi-Wan and Luke slip away, and the troopers seem to take no interest in Han or Chewie. And Han's really excited to have taken such a well-paying job, sends Chewie off to get the ship ready. And the reason we'll learn is because he owes money to a gangster, Jabba the Hutt, and plans to use the money from this job to pay him off. Now, Han's just leaving when he's accosted by a green alien named Greedo, who pokes a blaster into Han's chest, sits him back down at the table, and takes a seat directly across from him. Now, Greedo is a bounty hunter, and he's looking to collect on the bounty that Jabba the Hutt has put on Han's head after his failure to pay. Now, Han stalls for time, tells Greedo, I got the money this time. I was just on my way to see Jabba and tell him the good news. Greedo's, of course, only interested in his own profit. He continues to hold Han at gunpoint while conveying his intention to bring Han in and collect the bounty. Now, while they talk, we see under the table Han unclipping his blaster and drawing it discreetly out of his thigh holster. And the last lines of their conversation are, Greedo says, you can tell that to Jabba. He may only take your ship. Han says, over my dead body. And Greedo goes, that's the idea. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And at that point, blaster shots go off. The scene ends with Greedo slumped over dead on the table. Han then, in typical, smuggler, roguish bounty hunter fashion, flips a coin to the bartender, says sorry about the mess, and walks out. Now, this hopefully is a familiar scene to folks who are fans of the movie, but the reason the scene is controversial may not be that familiar unless you're kind of online. The reason is because subsequent edits made to that scene after the film's theatrical release in 1977 made changes to the scene that actually had an effect. They weren't just cosmetic. They changed the arc of Han's character. So basically, long story short, George Lucas considers the original film to be unfinished, somehow not yet a full realization of his original vision. He wants it the way he wants it to be, and he doesn't actually particularly care about how we feel about it. So this has led him to make repeated changes to A New Hope, as well as to Empire and Jedi, most notably in the 1997 20th anniversary special edition, as it's called. The special edition added digital effects, and actually even entire scenes that were unachievable in the original release, either due to financial constraints or technological constraints or time constraints in the production of the movie. It's not totally clear to me why George Lucas felt it necessary to edit this, like particularly this Han and Greedo scene from its original version, and in fact, to repeatedly edit it, as we'll see. Whereas a lot of the other changes in the special edition and subsequent releases were essentially cosmetic. Like I said, this one actually changes the scene's meaning fairly considerably. And importantly for a lot of fans, it affects how we understand Han Solo as a character. Now, that is not actually that important to us here for this conversation. If you want to talk about how you feel about Han Solo and the special edition, we could definitely do that at the end. What we're concerned with here is how these changes affect Han's culpability for the outcome of this encounter within the framework of a halachic discussion. So following the 1997 special edition release, this became something of a rallying cry. Han shot first, something of a rallying cry against these efforts to change the original film. So the first thing I want to show you is a quick little chart I made here of the version history, as it were, of the film Star Wars: A New Hope. So like I said, there was the 1997 theatrical cut. That's what folks saw in theaters when they went to the movies in 1977. It was also re-released in 78 and 79. Empire came out in 1980, played in theaters. A New Hope ran again in 81 and 82. In all those cuts, they saw the original version of that scene. Then the 1997 special edition, like I said, digitally remastered with some added and altered scenes. And then 3 subsequent versions, which we're going to look at. In the DVD trilogy, when it came out on a DVD box set in 2004, there were still more changes. Fun story. One of the things that initially I really liked about Amanda when we started dating was that she owned the DVD trilogy of Star Wars from 2004, which that was one of the only ways you could watch it at that point. But the DVD trilogy made yet more changes, including the scene, as we'll see. The Blu-ray release in 2011, still more changes. And actually I knew about those 4 versions. What I learned specifically in the preparation for this class is that the version that's now available on Disney Plus, now that Disney owns the rights to Star Wars and has put all their movies on their new streaming service, Disney Plus, there are still more changes. They actually changed it again for this. So 5 different versions of this scene that we're going to look at tonight. So what I've made for you, using some comparison video that was already put together by Star Wars fans, available on YouTube. So that'll cover the first 4 versions, and I've actually I took that and slowed it down too as well. So there'll be a slow-mo segment where you can see kind of much slower. It's going to play at like a quarter speed, so you can see exactly when the shots go off relative to one another. And I also added the footage from the 2019 version with a few notes to help this make sense as we go along. So I'll play it for you now. We'll watch it. It's a few minutes long. I do want to warn you, when you get to the part that's slow-mo, the sound also plays in slow-mo, and it is very weird to hear the blasters go off in slow-mo. So you might, like, if it's weird, turn down the volume. You won't miss anything. But I just want you to be all prepared for that. Sounds good? Okay, you've been duly warned. We're gonna optimize screen share for a video clip. Oops. Where is my video clip? Let's see. No, I'm not seeing my video. Hang on. Maybe I gotta go not full screen. Give me one sec. There we are. Okay. Here we go. Okay, how was that? Did you catch everything? Do we need to watch it again? Kinda? Okay. If you want to watch it again, that's okay. We can totally do that.
We don't want to watch it again, but we're not sure whether the last one, how it changed.
Oh, okay, perfect. Let me screen share again. Let's see. Oop. Where'd my video go? Oop. Here we go. Okay, so in the last version, it's the same as the previous one where they fire almost simultaneously, but they added using, like, recycling an earlier shot of Greedo from the front. They have him say something right before he fires, or before they both fire. It sounds like Maklunki, which is not subtitled. So we'll talk about the significance of that too. So he says something in that one too. Very weird. Okay. pull this back up. Where thumbnails minimized and oh, I see what the issue is. Hang in. I want to. Okay. Oh, okay. I couldn't. You got your videos all disappeared when I was pulling you up like that. So I don't want that. Okay. Did Han shoot first? So I've made you a convenient chart to help you track whether or not Han shot first in all of these releases. In the 1977 theatrical cut, yes, Han shot first. We see a cut to Greedo's face, a flash and smoke and the blaster sound, and then it goes right to shot of Greedo from behind, slumped over the table. And if you watch closely, especially in the slow-mo, you can see they actually used because it was all practical effects at that point. They used a dummy, which they had clearly wired explosives to, which actually looks very, very little like the Greedo you see, the guy in the suit. He's much sort of thinner, a little darker color. Anyway, I'll send you that video if you want to pour over this in more detail. So in the special edition, the second one, 1997, Han doesn't shoot first. Greedo shoots first and misses at Han. And as it said, they digitally manipulated Han's head so that he moves his head to the side. It looks very unnatural. But then they added in a spot on the wall behind him where the blaster shot misses him. And then you see Han from the hip fire twice and shoot and kill Greedo. In the 2004 DVD trilogy release, they've tightened it up. So whereas there was a more significant delay in the special edition where there's plausibly enough time for the Greedo shot to fire and then Han to return fire, it's much quicker, so they're almost at the same time. But Han still dodges and returns fire. It's just much faster. In the Blu-ray trilogy, they shoot at nearly the same time again, and they've dropped 10 more frames, so the pacing is then the same as in the original trilogy. The whole scene goes by in just as much time as in the theatrical release. And in 2019, like I said, no, they shoot at the same time. It's basically the same. Those frames are the same as in the Blu-ray trilogy, but now Greedo says something to him. Now, what does he say? And this is the part, this is just like too hilarious. He says something that sounds like Maklunki, which is not subtitled. It's not in the script, so we don't know what it says. But apparently intrepid fans scoured dictionaries of Huttese, the language that Jabba the Hutt speaks. And in the first prequel film, The Phantom Menace, the character Sebulba says something like Maklunki within a longer sentence, says that to Anakin. And the thinking is that it could mean something along the lines of, I'm going to end you, or this is the end for you. So, and then we cut to the reverse shot of Greedo. The reverse shot of Greedo has actually been removed, so that dummy is totally gone in the Disney Plus version. There's some new effects, but other than that, it's the same thing. Okay. So for the sake, since I don't speak Huttese, for the sake of this discussion, we're going to assume that that's some kind of a threat. It's some kind of menacing remark, because otherwise, why would you say it, I guess? But if you want to make a claim to the contrary, I suppose you're welcome to do so. But that's been the assumption I'm operating under. Okay. Questions so far about Star Wars version history, things of that nature? You can always just take yourself off of mute and ask away.
So I was just, you might have said this already, but I missed it. So
that's okay.
Was George Lucas responsible for some of the edits, but not all of them? It sounds like the Disney Plus thing, they did that.
So actually, I did almost as much research about Star Wars, about this stuff as I did on the actual Jewish content. This is all, I think, George Lucas. All the first 4 initial edits were his. That's when Lucasfilm still owned the rights to Star Wars. Apparently, I think Disney bought the rights to Star Wars in like 2012, or maybe something like that. So it was actually but George Lucas still made those changes that are now in the streaming version. He made them in between 2011 Blu-ray release and Disney buying the rights. So George will get, yeah, this came out in an article because everyone wanted to know, did Disney make these changes? Apparently not. Lucas made these changes himself, and that's the version that Disney now owns. I can't offer any plausible explanation for why George Lucas feels it necessary to continue to edit this scene, but it actually makes, I think, I was prepared for this to be another sort of cosmetic edit, but I think the fact that Greedo says something makes for yet another interesting case for us to examine, through a lens of halacha. Okay, any other questions about version history, things like that? I know this is super complicated, so I want to make sure we're all set.
Okay,
All right.
this isn't. It's not about the version history, and hopefully I'm not getting ahead here. But is the implication that the bounty on Han's head, it's for him dead or alive, and it's the same bounty whether he's alive or dead?
I don't think it's ever explicit.
Okay, because I feel like that's actually becomes quite an important factor in determining whether Han acted in self-defense. Like, what was the level of threat against him?
Good. So let's say that we're definitely going to talk about that later.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Good thinking.
Cool.
Good thinking. Okay. All right. So our question tonight basically is how do these different versions of the same incident affect our evaluation of Han's actions from a halachic perspective? So the first thing we got to do is establish, what's at stake, basically. And to do that, we're going to look at one of the fundamental texts of the genre of halacha, the Mishnah Torah. Now, the Mishnah Torah is what they call a law code, and it was authored by Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, also known as Maimonides, also known as the Rambam. When you're a big deal rabbi, you get a cool rabbi acronym name, so he's the Rambam. And this is one of the most important, most authoritative law codes. He's divided it into many different sections. This one, the one we're going to look at from the section on the murder and the preservation of life, so deals with all sorts of issues related to both taking and saving of lives. And we're going to look at the first and fourth halachot from the first chapter. Could I get a volunteer to read these out loud? Go ahead and take yourself off mute, jump in. Who wants it?
I'm happy to.
Go ahead, Richard, thank you.
Okay. Whenever a person kills a human being, they transgress a negative commandment. As Exodus 20:13 states, do not murder. If a person kills a Jew intentionally in the presence of witnesses, they should be executed by decapitation. This is implied by Exodus 21:20, which states that when a person kills a servant, quote, vengeance will certainly be executed. The oral tradition explains that this refers to decapitation. Whether they kill the victim with an iron weapon or burn them with fire, the murderer should be executed by decapitation.
Okay, I'll pause you there for just 1 second, then I'll have you keep going. So this is it's very straightforward, but you kind of have to begin your chapter on murder here with the commandment lo tirtzach, right? Do not murder. For the sake of our argument, we're not going to worry about whether Greedo, the alien bounty hunter, counts as a human being or not, or whether Han or any of the people involved count as Jews or not. We're going to assume everyone's a person, and all of these laws apply to everyone, regardless. And that piece about decapitation is basically, you might have thought that it would be, like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, like that. The manner of execution would be in the same manner as however they killed the person. That's not the case. It's all the sort of generic execution method of decapitation. Okay, so murder is a capital offense. We got that. Go ahead, Richard. Can you read halacha 4 too, please?
Sure. The court is enjoined not to accept ransom from the murderer to save them from execution, even if they gave all the money in the world, and even if the blood redeemer was willing to forgive them, they should be executed. The rationale is that the soul of the victim is not the property of the blood redeemer, but the property of the Holy One of blessing. And God commanded, do not accept ransom for the soul of a murderer, Numbers 35:31. There's nothing that the Torah warns so strongly against as murder, as Numbers 35:33 states, do not pollute the land in which you live, for blood will pollute the land.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So this is important background information too. Not only is murder a capital offense, there is no way out of capital punishment as the sentence for murder. There is no alternative punishment. The Torah is pretty clear about this. There's no amount of money you can pay. There's some other stuff going on here it's not directly relevant, but maybe you may be curious about as well. The idea of a blood redeemer is not something you're likely familiar with. The idea is basically if someone murders a member of my family, I am then responsible for taking vengeance on behalf of that person's murder against the murderer. And there are rules about the family relations that designate like who's specifically in charge of revenge. And this interacts with a system of sanctuary and sanctuary cities, where a murderer who killed somebody, or somebody who killed someone accidentally, could flee to these places or grasp the horns of the altar and be safe from this retribution. So basically, this is establishing, even if the family of the one who was the victim wants to forgive the murder, they're not allowed to do that. It's got to be a life for a life. This is interacting also with important values we learn elsewhere. That's a whole other shiur about the value of human life. The idea is basically that human life is effectively infinitely valuable. Each one of us has infinite worth. So the only way to repay the value of an infinite value is with another infinity. That's why it's got to be a person for a person, right? This interacts with ideas of humans being created in the image of God. How can an image of God be anything less than infinitely valuable, right? So these passages at the beginning of Rambam's discussion of the laws for a murderer serve, I think, to establish what's at stake in our discussion. If by killing Greedo, Han committed murder, then from the perspective of halacha, he's guilty and he's liable for the death penalty. So it actually matters a lot what exactly the circumstances under which this killing happened. So okay, human life effectively infinitely valuable. This has two consequences that are relevant, and Maimonides goes into a lot further detail through the other, I think, 8 or 9 chapters of this about murders and preservation of life. Basically, destroying a life is just about the worst thing you can do because of the infinite value. But on the other hand, saving a life is actually among the very best things you can do because of that infinite value. This is summed up, I think, really nicely here in a passage from Talmud. It's down at the bottom, source number 4 in Sanhedrin. Could I get a volunteer to read this one out? Susan,
I'll read it.
Oh, Ari's got it. Thanks, Ari.
Okay. Therefore, Adam, the first man, was created alone to teach you that with regard to anyone who destroys one soul from the Jewish people, i.e., kills one Jew, the verse ascribes them blame as if they had destroyed an entire world, as Adam was one person from whom the whole population of an entire world came forth. And conversely, anyone who sustains one soul from the Jewish people, the verse ascribes them credit as if they sustained an entire world.
Awesome, thanks. So I think this is kind of an important palate cleanser for me from that discussion of, decapitation. It's human life is incredibly valuable, and that's why it's, I think, worthwhile to have these kind of discussions and to kind of carefully analyze, even for our fictional scenario here. Okay, so we know already that a murderer's life must be forfeit. However, that's not the end of the story here. let's keep reading. I need another volunteer to read source number 5 there, the very next halacha in the Mishnah Torah. Lynn, you're off mute. Does that mean you're ready to read?
I am off mute. I'm ready to read, but I did have a quick question about the in the presence of witnesses, and I'm not sure if we're going to get back to that or not.
Not especially, because that pertains to presentation of evidence and the rules around trials and things like that. I suppose I took it for granted that since, you know, the incident in question happens in the middle of the cantina, there are witnesses, but I wasn't going to specifically talk about that.
No worries. I was just curious.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that is, yeah, there's lots of other halakha around who counts as a kosher witness, what they need to have seen. There's a whole piece where they're actually the piece from Sanhedrin that Ari read is part of a longer paragraph that the judge on a court reads to the witness in a murder case, or reads to the witnesses in a murder case, so they understand what's at stake. Basically, like warning them, you're testifying about whether somebody committed murder, and this is super duper serious. Yeah, so in a way we did sort of cover that. All right, so you mind reading there halakha number 5 at the top?
Sure thing. When a murderer kills willfully, they should not be killed by witnesses or observers until they are brought to court and sentenced to death, as implied by Numbers 35:12. A murderer should not be put to death until they stand before the congregation in judgment. This law applies to all those liable for execution by the court who transgressed and performed the forbidden act. They should not be executed until their trial is completed by the court.
Good. Okay. So despite what we said about this institution of I'm sorry, not a blood avenger, what do they call him? A blood redeemer. They're not supposed to take revenge right away. If this was a witness crime, then the trial is really important. You can see the sort of foundations of the legal system that we live in right now at work here, that the trial and sentencing is really important to this whole process. So they're supposed to be brought, into a court of law. Now, let's suppose after walking out of the cantina, Han was immediately apprehended by, I don't know, the Mos Eisley sheriff or whatever, and charged with murder. Pretend you're Han's lawyer in that case. What sort of defense might you offer on behalf of Han Solo against a murder charge?
Self-defense.
Self-defense, right? That's right. Okay. It was self-defense. Greedo would have killed him. Fortunately, Rambam thinks about this too, and that's exactly where we're going to go next. Can I get a volunteer to read source number 6, the next 2 halachot in the Mishnah Torah there?
Yeah, I can.
Thanks, Susan. Go ahead.
When does the above apply? When the person has already transgressed and performed the transgression for which they are liable to be executed by the court. When, however, a person is pursuing a colleague with the intention of killing them, even if the pursuer is a minor, every Jewish person is commanded to attempt to save the person being pursued, even if it is necessary to kill the pursuer.
Keep going.
Keep going?
Yep.
What is implied? If the rodef, pursuer, was warned and continues to pursue their intended victim, even though they did not acknowledge the warning, since they continue their pursuit, they should be killed. If it is possible to save the pursued by damaging one of the limbs of the rodef, one should. Thus, if one can strike them with an arrow, a stone, or a sword, and cut off their hand, break their leg, blind them, or in another way prevent them from achieving their objective, one should do so. If there is no way to be precise in one's aim and save the person being pursued without killing the rodef, one should kill them, even though they have not yet killed their victim. This is implied by Deuteronomy 25:11-12, which states, if a man is fighting with his brother and the wife of one grabs the attacker by his private parts, you must cut off her hand. You may not show pity.
Okay, so this one, sorry about that. You got the private parts one. Yeah, so this verse is obviously a little bit out of context, but what's going on there is that two men are fighting, and the woman like intervenes in the battle to essentially bring about a killing blow on one of the attackers. She's implicated in this, and so they, she has to have you got to cut her hand off so that she can't complete the act of killing one of these two guys, and you must not show pity. So we've basically, Rambam agrees with our with the premise of our defense of Han Solo, that self-defense is a valid reason to kill somebody, and he invokes what's established to be essentially a halachic category of person, which is called a rodef. Rodef means a one who is pursuing, a pursuer, someone who's pursuing another person, intending to kill them. So Rambam agrees killing a rodef is not murder, and actually, interestingly, goes further. And I think this is actually playing out what we introduced already, the idea that each human life is infinitely valuable, and not only is taking one like destroying a world, but saving one is like saving a world. Goes further to say that it's in fact an obligation incumbent on every Jew to attempt to save the person who's being pursued, even at the cost of the pursuer's life. Every Jew. Who does that include? The one being pursued, right? So every Jew, the one being pursued is obligated, just like we would all be to intervene, obligated to actually act to save their own life. Self-defense is not only a potentially valid excuse for taking a life, it's actually mandatory, right? They have to try to act to save their own life, because allowing themselves to be killed would be destroying a world, just like allowing someone else to be killed. Make sense? Kind of? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In this last case, is there going to be a trial?
Sorry, which, about the...
So a third person intervened and killed the pursuer.
Oh,
sure. Do we now need a trial for the murder of the pursuer?
For the murder of the pursuer. It's possible. Rambam doesn't go into that here. I expect that this is something explored elsewhere. I have to presume that the answer would be yes, because there's been a killing. And presumably, the defense of the one who killed the pursuer would try to establish that they were doing exactly this, right? That it was not premeditated, it was an act to defend a life rather than, proactively take one. So I presume the answer would be yes. Side note, cutting off the hand of the pursuer seems like actually a level deeper we could go with the Star Wars Torah, because there's like sort of a hand cutting off motif, like Vader cuts off Luke's hand and Luke cuts off Vader's hand. And actually this scene happens just a couple of moments after Obi-Wan cuts off that guy's arm after he shoves Luke at the bar, you may recall. It's not clear what happens to that guy. I think he dies. I think we could also talk about that scene as an example of stopping a rodef, but it hasn't been as interestingly edited and re-edited as this one, so I didn't go there. Anyhow, that's the side note. So Rambam doesn't show all his work here. One of the deals with the genre of the law code is the purpose is to make kind of practically useful reference volumes that ordinary people can use to look up what to do in certain scenarios. The issue with the Talmud, for example, is it's not indexed. In order to find something like this, you would have to read through, volumes and pages and everything to try to look it up. Rambam is really trying to distill it all down and give you just the bottom line. So he deliberately leaves out a lot of the source material and the values and things like that that he's taking into account. He was actually really, criticized heavily for that when this came out. So he doesn't, like I said, doesn't show all his work. He's actually drawing on multiple claims that are in the Talmud that say explicitly what he's saying. And the Talmud in turn is likely drawing on halachic midrash, like this one down at the bottom from Bamidbar Rabbo. It's a collection of midrash halacha. It's homiletical interpretations of the book of Numbers that have halakhic importance or have halakhic lessons drawn from them. Where it says, it's interpreting these verses from Numbers 25, where it says, assail the Midianites and defeat them. Why? As it says in the following verse, for they assailed you. So the sages have said, if someone comes to kill you, act first to kill them. So it's explicitly a rabbinic interpretation of Torah law. You have to act to stop a pursuer, rather of someone else or someone who's coming to kill you. That's a positive obligation on you. Okay. How are we doing? Questions so far? Questions about the rodef or anything along those lines? What questions do you have?
I guess I'm just, it suddenly got very tangled for me just then, because it's like, if murder is so, if it's like the worst thing in the world and you're just like never supposed to do it, then it's very complicated though. Why is it okay to murder someone who's thinking about killing you, but they haven't done it yet? It feels like such a narrow rope to walk.
I agree. And I'm glad I'm not a judge who has to actually adjudicate these kind of cases for real. I think that, I think the Rambam is sort of playing this out in a vacuum. In theory, this all makes sense, based on how we've evaluated the stakes of killing, right? If the alternative is to allow someone's life to be taken unjustly, then it makes sense, if that's a certainty, to turn around and take the life of the person who would be doing that before they can accomplish that, right? That seems less unjust. If a life has to be lost one way or the other, I'd rather it be the would-be murderer, right? But you're right, it ain't always that clear cut, right? And unfortunately, this is not the end of the halachic discussion. There are law codes that come after this and responsa and all sorts of things that we're not going to get into today. But also, it's probably not as complete a discussion as we would like, because at a certain point, Jews weren't in the position of being, halacha stopped really needing to rule on things like murders once there were states and state, courts and court systems that handled that kind of thing. So, yeah, I would validate that feeling, Sari.
Thanks.
I have a question now.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So this is assuming that there's equality between the victim and the pursuer. It may be the case that the victim, the alleged victim, or the person who's being pursued,
right,
is not equal to the pursuer and has no way that they can affect the murder to defend themselves, let alone cut off their hand.
Oh, you're equal in terms of physical capability.
Yeah. It could be adult and a child. It could be alone,
Right.
I'm sort of thinking about Asimov's 3 laws. Do you remember them?
The 3 laws of robotics, you mean?
Yeah. Isn't the first one that you won't obey a command that causes a human being to die?
Or through an action allowing.
And the second one, or through an action, yeah. And the second one is through an inaction,
right?
Unless it violates the first law, and you won't destroy yourself unless it violates one of the first 2 laws.
Right.
So there should be some kind of hierarchy here to work this out.
Yeah. I think again, this sort of plays out in a vacuum where everyone is equal. Yeah, I think that's totally true, and it doesn't take into account nuances like that. It's sort of, in the ideal case, what would we like to see happen? We would like to see, the one who's pursued or someone around stop the murder before it happens, right? Short of that, that we would like to see them try to defend themselves, right? Try to stop them, which makes sense, but right, it's not very nuanced here. Yeah, but I think importantly, they are equal in terms of their value, right? There's sort of no sense that any human life is more or less value than another, right? they're all infinities, even the ones that would go about committing murder. Yeah.
You keep raising new questions in my mind. On the previous page, we were talking about a servant. Is a servant thought to be a slave?
Let's see. In this particular case, yes. So Rambam is working with the Torah as a source, obviously, which recognizes a category of person, which is not a servant or a slave, who is in some sense the property of their owner. And there are circumstances, and the halacha has to go into this because of the stuff where a slave owner can hit their slave to either to motivate them to work or to punish them for disobedience or things like that. And so it has to address, okay, what happens if the owner hits too hard and kills the servant? Is that a murder? The answer is, yeah, mostly, but it's a little squishier than it otherwise would be. Yeah, that's not real great stuff in this, from our modern point of view at all. But I think that's what Rambam is reckoning with here. He's pulling one of those verses that has to do with killing a servant to help support his position about the bigger idea about prohibition on murder.
Last question, I promise.
That's okay.
Did Moses murder the Egyptian?
I mean, it depends who you ask. It's not clear from all it says is Moses hit him and killed him, right? So, I mean, I think there's midrash that would have you believe, have you believe no, and there's midrash that would have you believe yes.
Moses was defending somebody who
Right.
might have been killed, right?
So it depends what you think about, right? And there's not enough detail, I don't think, there aren't multiple different edits of that version with special effects and everything for us to review, unfortunately. But good thing, I'm glad you're thinking about Pesach already, Mike. That's good. It's never even before Purim, it's never too early. Okay. So let's go back to our 5 different versions of Greedo and Han, right? So this time we're going to look at their interaction through this lens of the halacha category of a rodef, right? Is Greedo a rodef? Is he a pursuer intent on killing Han? And if so, how sure about that can Han be? So we're going to walk through each of these cases. I want to go back to this one, so you remember exactly what happens in each one. So what do you think? How would you judge each of these questions? We'll talk about them one at a time. Theatrical cut. Greedo, Han's like, over my dead body. Greedo says, that's the idea. And Han shoots first, killing Greedo. What do you think? Based on what we've learned from Rambam et al. How culpable is Han here?
I think it's self-defense.
Okay.
Right.
Even shooting first. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
I think
even
that's totally
shooting
plausible, but
first.
say why.
Well, I mean, Greedo has his gun pointed at Han, correct?
Right.
That in and of itself is a threat.
Mm-hmm.
So even if he shoots first, it would still be considered self-defense, and I think Rambam or whoever would support that. That would not constitute murder.
Okay. I think that's totally plausible. Ari, what were you going to say?
I pretty much agree with that. I think the fact that Greedo says that's the idea means that he has no intention of taking Han alive. So it's like, yeah, right. He's got the weapon pointed at him. He announces his intentions. He has means, motive, and opportunity. Everything has happened except the actual act of murder itself.
Sure.
The thing is, looking at the thing on the next page.
Yeah.
Where it says if there's no way to be precise in one's aim and save the person being pursued without killing the rodef, one should kill
Good.
them. Here's the thing, like, it's at point blank range.
Right.
Han being, and I think we can assume that given his experience and a life of crime, he's
Yeah.
probably has good enough aim to
Although
shoot,
apparently
disarm at point blank range as opposed to shooting to kill.
Good. Okay. So now we're getting somewhere interesting,
So-
right?
Yeah,
Well done.
that's the only problem I have with what he did.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that Richard brings up some good points. That yes, Greedo already has his gun drawn. You know, he's, you know, I think that exchange about over my dead body, that's the idea, very well could be taken as a threat, a conveying intention to bring Han, you know, and I don't think we know about the bounty. I think we have to assume that it's dead or alive, you know, based on this, you know, based on this interaction. That does seem in character for Jabba the Hutt too. You know, although he's pretty delighted later on to have Han, you know, alive but frozen in carbonite. So, you know, I don't know. So that could well be taken as a threat, and I think you could definitely make a good argument that this is still this preemptive strike is still self-defense. However, I think Ari brings up a really good point that yeah, maybe he didn't do what's asked for here, and went to, you know, shot him, you know, center of mass in the chest, killing him when he could have wounded him somewhere or disarmed him, something like that, right? Or even not fired at all if he was able to dodge that shot, as we see later. Who knows? Good. So I think there's also a discussion here to be had about you know, what we can sort of assume from context about the intent of a bounty hunter, kind of generally, and about what a bounty hunter, someone in that line of work, will do or not do. We'll get into this a bit more, hopefully right a little bit later, about kind of what can we assume from context, like the context of the encounter, about what implicit intentions are there. I think you could definitely argue that no bounty hunter would go try to collect a bounty from an armed man without being willing to kill that man, right? Or even intent on killing that man, should it be necessary. So I think you could definitely argue that about Greedo. Yeah, he could well be a rodef here. I don't think we're going to get all the way to firm conclusions on any of these. So I think we're going to have to content ourselves with raising the issues and moving on. How about in the special edition, 1997? Here, Greedo shoots first and misses before Han fires. He dodges his head digitally to the sign. In this one, there's the greatest lag in between Greedo firing and Han responding. What do you think about this one? How would what's Han's culpability here?
Very culpable.
Very culpable for murder? But go on, Andrew.
I mean, with the lag you see, I think he knows that he didn't get shot, and he could have, again, with his amazing skill and accuracy. Ideally, he would have been able to shoot the shoulder, shoot the side, shoot somewhere less lethal. You know, whether maybe he tried and he accidentally shot him, but I think that one's a little bit more because he obviously dodged and maybe had other options. But then again, also self-defense. You know, there could have been a second shot by Greedo, but I'd say more likely.
Good. Okay, so actually, this is really interesting because I think this could kind of go both ways. On the one hand, yeah, maybe he is, or maybe on the one hand, maybe he's. This is a better claim to self-defense in that he waited for. You know, he didn't act on just his presumption of Greedo's intent. He waited till Greedo actually took a shot at him, and then returned fire, right? So, you know, it's also, you know, he might have waited until he heard that blaster impact behind him before firing, despite being, you know, ready to do so. You know, also maybe because he moves his head to dodge, maybe he was reading Greedo's body language, sort of waiting for him to tense as if to pull the trigger. That sounds plausible for a guy who's in scraps like this a lot, right? But there's a wrinkle here too, which I think Andrea is really astute to bring up. If there's that lag of more time, maybe that it actually increases Han's culpability because he could have then taken more time to shoot to disarm or to maim as opposed to kill. Han shoots twice. And it goes by super fast, but you see 2 different blaster bolts from Han. Han shoots twice. So what do you think? Does that overreach the Rambam's claim that you should only incapacitate a rodef if possible? Like maybe he should have shot once and waited before firing again, firing twice in succession. Well, now he's over the line. What do you think?
So Rabbi Phil, so does Han shoot twice in the original, in the theatrical release?
In the theatrical cut, I don't think you see it. I would have to go back and review.
Okay.
You don't really see the blaster shot.
Okay.
They didn't, yeah, you don't really see the blaster shot.
But in all the later ones though, it does look like he shoots twice?
So, right, so in the theatrical cut, you see Han and Greedo, like the front on shot of Han, and then it cuts immediately to the front shot of Greedo and the practical effect exploding, but you don't see the blaster fire. So it's not totally clear whether he shoots once or twice. I don't think. I would have to go back and watch that one.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and watch. But definitely in the special edition and all the subsequent ones, Greedo fires once, Han fires twice.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, right?
This is kind of a side issue, but there's also the fact that this is in a crowded place with a really high risk of collateral damage.
Sure.
It seems like and maybe, I don't know, here's a going out on a limb. Maybe that's a justification for him aiming for center of mass instead of trying to shoot him in the arm to disarm him or something.
Right. It was
much more likely to miss and hit someone, an innocent person standing behind him.
Right. The longer Greedo remains alive and shooting, the greater chance, an errant shot is going to kill somebody else. Now we're getting somewhere. Well done. Okay. So this is a tough case. Well, this is yeah. Go ahead.
I was imagining this from Han's perspective, because he's sitting in a booth against the wall, firing potentially I guess we can't really, I don't know if we ever get a camera angle that shows what's behind Greedo. Oh, I guess we kind of do.
We might.
No, maybe not. I don't remember.
I think we do. We see 2 people walking behind them.
Yeah.
Right. So if Han misses, his shots go into the crowd.
Oh, okay.
So he has an additional burden of being more careful.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second now. We need a ballistics expert. Because I don't know how blasters work. They shoot something like a bullet, or is it something
it's supposed to be a laser
that only goes at the person,
right,
or at the object?
Okay, since we're getting into this,
lay it on,
officially the way the blasters supposedly work is by firing like a basically a spray. They're basically spraying some sort of flammable gas.
Oh, really?
That is then ignited all at once. I believe, because I have a Star Wars, a technical manual. Book published with the explanations of all the Star Wars technology. That's apparently how they explain it in there.
Okay.
But basically, it's they appear to the blaster bolts basically travel in a perfectly straight line, and they seem to have very, very long range.
Right.
And cause burn, basically
but
like a burn damage.
They don't go through people necessarily.
No, I don't believe so. I don't think we've ever seen a blaster go through people
I don't think
the way like a lightsaber does.
Okay, so then we're not concerned about stray bullets hitting innocent bystanders.
Like it couldn't ricochet.
Unless only if he misses.
Right, only if he misses.
Or if it ricochets, yes, because they can bounce.
So I think the important point Ari's raising here is if Han goes for the incapacitating shot, that's a riskier shot. It's
That's
not
right.
it's not at the center of mass. It's more a peripheral. And so if he misses too far one direction, he misses completely and hits someone behind. Whereas the
Exactly.
center of mass shot is more lethal, but a much higher percentage to hit and end the confrontation right there. Okay, this is good stuff. This is already exactly what I was hoping for. Okay, let's run down the other few. So in the DVD trilogy, they've tightened up the timing such that they shoot essentially the same time. Like Greedo maybe a frame or two earlier than Han, but I think whereas you could possibly say in the special edition, Han waited for Greedo to fire first and then return fire. You can't make that claim here anymore. It's at best simultaneous. What do you think? Does that change anything for you in terms of whether Greedo's a rodef? Was Han in the right or not? What do you think?
Yeah, it seems like that's definitely self-defense to me. They're both firing at the same time.
Right.
The chances of one of them being killed was very high. So
Sure.
he had to protect himself.
I think so. This one feels to me the most like almost the most ambiguous, and the Blu-ray trilogy tightens it even further. So I think the closer the timing between Greedo's shot and Han's response, potentially, the weaker the claim to self-defense, because it's more based on Han's appraisal of Greedo's intent than it is on his response to actions. Does that make sense? Like when there's a lag where Greedo fires, misses, and then Han returns fire, he can possibly say, he shot at me. No, I'm fully justified to return fire and shoot him. Where the timing is much tighter, he's much more reliant on, I think he's going to shoot me or shoot at me before firing himself. Like it's much closer to the preemptive strike. I think in the Blu-ray trilogy, where it's almost where they drop 10 frames and it's even tighter timing, we might actually even have like a third sort of category of action, like not responding to an attack and not preemptively striking before an attack, but actually like kind of an instinctive response. It's almost like fast twitch muscle fiber kind of thing. Like you can't react to that. You can't consciously process at that speed, right? Like it's got to be totally instinctive. And so that could potentially play into Han's defense too. I wasn't thinking. Greedo twitched, so I twitched and shot, and we shot at the same time, right? Something like that. How about in Disney Plus? So Greedo says something to Han. They shoot nearly at the same time, but Greedo adds "Maklunki." Could be a threat or potentially a statement of a much clearer statement of intent than just over my dead body. That's the idea.
Yeah, like I think we already established Greedo's intent to kill Han. So
Right.
I guess this does maybe somewhat strengthen the case by signifying his intent to kill him in that moment.
Right.
As opposed to maybe I'd rather take you out of the bar first and then shoot you in the desert or something. I don't know. But clearly he wants the bounty. It's going to be easier for him to get the bounty if Han is dead, because as long as Han's still alive, he can put up a fight.
Sure.
So
yeah. So I think this one is in some ways, like I was wondering, like, why bother to add a line of dialogue in here? And I suspect that this may finally be Lucas trying to sort of close the door on this, although he's clearly still done it in kind of a ham-fisted way, because we don't know what the line means. But to sort of definitively say Greedo made his intention as explicit, Han was acting in self-defense, and he's not a cold-blooded killer or something like that. That's the best I can figure. That's the best I can figure. Okay. How are we doing on time? All right, we're doing okay. Let's oh, Richard, Sari.
I have a question. So, so you did
I
too?
was, yeah.
Oh, we both did. I guess. So I know we watched all the clips, but they're kind of blurring in my mind. But does Greedo say over my dead body? No.
Han says
Han says that. Does
Right.
Greedo say that's the idea
that's the idea.
in all of the clips?
Yes.
He always says that, but then in
Right.
the latest one, he also says something else that's not
Yes.
translated.
Right. Something not subtitled, so we don't know what, like, whereas every other line of alien language is translated in English for us in subtitles, we don't know what that line means. But the
Yeah.
prevailing theory is it's a threat or a statement of intention.
So it doesn't seem like it's that important to have added another potential threat. I get he's just really trying to solidify.
It's potentially more explicit. If he's saying I'm going to end you, he's literally saying like I'm going to kill you now.
And
As
I wonder
opposed to
why
just
they
saying, just sort
then
of
why didn't they translate it? If he really wanted to eliminate the ambiguity.
so I'm just trying to guess at why Lucas bothered to do a 5th edit on this, right? And that's my guess, but he's still sort of, sort of botched it.
Yeah.
So here's my comment,
Okay.
and that is, does it matter whether or not Han shot first? What we know is that they both shoot at each other.
Mm-hmm.
Greedo misses, Han doesn't. But we know that in the circumstance that Greedo is the one who's made a threat of one sort or another. He's the one who first pointed his blaster at Han.
Sure.
If this was to go to trial at a
Right.
Beijing afterwards, yeah, Han obviously has the upper hand by saying that it was self-defense.
Sure. I mean, so I think a lot depends on the legality of bounty hunting, right? Like if this is somehow a operating within the law, Jabba's debt is somehow, or Han's debt to Jabba is somehow like this is a legitimate collection procedure somehow. I don't know. Like I think we're supposed to sort of see this as the Wild West a little bit. And so we're just sort of imagining that there's laws at work here where there would be a murder trial after this, but yeah, clearly that's not how it works in desert planets in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, I've got one more question here.
Shoot.
So the fact regarding the Disney Plus edit, the
Okay.
fact that Lucas felt the need to add that additional threat, I feel like it makes the earlier situation more ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
It almost implies that maybe there was still some ambiguity about how
Right.
imminent the threat was,
Right.
which raises a question that ties into Jewish law of like, okay, so let's say, what if Han Solo could have done something to avoid any bloodshed at all? What if he had said, okay, I will go with you to Jabba's palace. He had
Right.
dropped his weapon in front of Greedo
Right.
and somehow had a way to make it clear to Greedo that he wasn't a threat and he was going to be fully cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, it would have, Jabba may have tortured him or put him in carbonite or whatever he was
Sure.
intending to do
Yeah.
at that point, but it might have been able to avoid loss of life.
Right.
How much, like, and looking at that from the Jewish law perspective, what kind of a duty, if he wanted to follow Jewish law, what kind of duty would Han Solo have? How far would he have to go to try to placate Greedo and avoid any bloodshed?
I don't know. This is a lot farther. That's a lot farther than the Rambam goes.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's. I imagine maybe there's been responsa literature or something like that to that effect, but I am not enough of an expert to know. That I mean, you were thinking like a halachas though, Ari. That's the important thing. Is what are all the possible consequences here?
It's like if a mugger holds you at gunpoint,
right?
And they say your money or your life. I mean, this is the more clear-cut version of it. But if they say your money or your life, and you also have a gun,
right?
Can you shoot them because they clearly intend to kill you if you don't turn over your wallet, or are you obligated to turn over the wallet since that has a chance at least of avoiding bloodshed?
This is a really good segue into my closing section.
Okay.
Sounds like one of your folks has something to add, so I'll let them get in here before I bring to a close.
I was just going to say that it seems really important what Ari is saying, because it sort of touches on what I was bringing up before, how uncomfortable I felt about, saying you've got to kill the pursuer.
Right.
It just seems like it would be a higher value for nobody to kill anybody, for no life to be taken, because if all life is infinitely valuable, then the best possible response would be to prevent any loss of life.
So I think we're all doing the right thing. Like we're all getting it here in that we're all sort of noting how each of these cases opens up this deeper layer of discussion around intent, both demonstrated intent in terms of actual action, actual shots fired, and also implied intent based on the context. Greedo's role as a bounty hunter, Han being Han, the location that they're in, all that kind of stuff. So we won't dive too much deeper into these halakha discussions, but I do want to demonstrate that the Talmud and the Rambam anticipate these kind of questions. So I'll go ahead and read these just for the sake of time. So here in the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin, Daf 72a, they're talking about a burglar who breaks into a house. This is part of a discussion where somebody's breaking and entering. So the sages taught in a Braita, which is a source from about the time of the Mishnah, but that was not in the Mishnah. I actually like to describe it as sort of part of the director's cut, something that was left on the cutting room floor. But they're citing a rabbinic tradition that says the verses state if a burglar is found breaking in and is smitten, in other words, hit and dies, there shall not be blood guilt on his account. If the sun is risen upon him, there shall be blood guilt on his account. These are two verses from Exodus 22. So a question may be raised, but did the sun rise only upon him? The implication being, I think that can we take this literally? That if the sun rose upon him, just the burglar, how could that possibly work? That's just not how the sun works. The sun rises on everybody or nobody. So therefore, we can't be talking about a literal sunrise. Rather, these words must be understood in a metaphoric sense. If the matter is as clear to you as the sun, is how they understand this, that the burglar is not coming to you in peace, but rather has his intention is to kill you, then arise and kill him first. But if you're not sure about his intentions, don't kill him. Right? So here we're getting to this discussion about what can we presume the intent of a breaking and entering burglar to be. However, it's taught in another Braita. The verse states, if the sun is risen upon him, there shall be blood, there should be bloodshed on his account. It should say blood guilt on his account. I changed that to make more sense, but I missed this one. A question has been raised, but did the sun rise only upon him? Rather, these words must be understood as follows. If the matter is clear to you as the sun that the burglar is coming to you in peace, then don't kill him. But if you're not sure about his intentions, arise and kill him. You can look closely at these and see that they're inverse. They have two different versions. Basically, there were two different guys who remembered this, and they remembered it opposite ways. Is that you have to be clear as the sun that he is coming to kill you, in which case you're allowed to strike. Otherwise, if you're at all uncertain, don't. Or is it you have to be clear as the sun that he isn't going to kill you, and if there's any ambiguity, you're allowed to kill him. Big difference. So the Gemara notes a difficulty. The halacha in the undetermined case, as stated in the first braita, contradicts the halacha in the undetermined case, as stated in the second braita. First indicates the homeowner is unsure about the burglar's intentions. He's prohibited from killing. Whereas the second braita says he is permitted if he's unclear. So, okay. Basically, the Gemara works its way out of this situation in kind of an awkward way by narrowing the case to be the cases of these two braita to be so narrow that they can never really actually happen. Rambam, fortunately, in his work, trying to make this a code, comes along and clarifies things for us. So here's what he says in his section on theft. When a person breaks into a home, whether at night or during the day, and this is actually, he's sort of tacitly addressing another idea, is maybe that sunrise thing is about daytime breaking and entering versus nighttime breaking and entering. Rambam says it doesn't matter. Night or day, license is granted to kill him. If either the homeowner or another person kills them, they're not liable. Kills the burglar, right? The license to kill them applies both on the Sabbath and during the week, and one may kill in any possible manner. This is all implied by Exodus 22, verse 1, which reads, "There shall not be blood guilt on his account." So skipping over number 8 to number 9, why did the Torah permit the blood of such a thief to be shed, although they are only attempting to steal money? And this gets to Ari's point. This is why I said this was a good transition. If Greedo's only after money and not intent on violence, maybe there's no possible justification for killing him, right? How can we say a person who's only after money can be killed? Like, how is their life forfeit? Because it's an accepted presumption that the house owner arises and attempts to prevent the thief from stealing. The thief will slay them. Rambam's saying it's just a presumption we're going to make about breaking and entering. No one does that unless they're prepared to encounter the homeowner. And no one's prepared, part of being prepared to encounter the homeowner means being prepared to overcome them and get what you want, right? Because the presumption is they're going to try to stop you. So Rambam says that's the assumption for breaking and entering cases. Thus, the thief entering their colleague's house to steal is in effect a pursuer, a rodef, seeking to kill their colleague. Therefore, they should be killed whether they're an adult or a minor, a man or a woman. If it's clear to the house owner, though, that the thief who breaks in is not to kill them, and instead is only seeking financial gain, and I think the case here is, the thief personally, probably, or they're even, in fact, a family member, they have no intent to kill you, they just want to rob you, then it's forbidden to kill the thief. And if the homeowner kills them, the house owner is considered to be a murderer. So we can go a lot, there's a lot more to this discussion, obviously, but I mostly just want to demonstrate to you that your feelings of discomfort, the feelings that it can't possibly be this simple, well, you're right. This is all what gets explored in the halakhic literature. I think, though, that if I were pressed for a ruling on the original theatrical cut, where Han shoots first, and kills Greedo preemptively, I think this is the source material that I would draw on. It's evaluations of what I think about Greedo, or what I think Han thinks about Greedo and what he's willing to do. This is how I would come to a ruling. I said we weren't going to talk about why this matters from the standpoint of storytelling and why fans care about this, but to sort of sum it up, it's in the original version where Han shoots first that Han's character is the most morally ambiguous, I guess, and to agree, and I agree, I think, with the prevailing opinion that this sort of undercuts Han's story arc. He starts from, instead of starting further away as kind of a more cold-blooded killer, a worse guy, to make his way back to being a heroic good guy, he sort of already starts out as kind of a good guy, because he won't fire first. He'll only fire in self-defense. That's kind of a good guy thing, and it sort of makes the distance he travels as a character a little shorter. But as a closing point, I do want to point out that even in his most morally ambiguous original version, Han still actually scrupulously complies with another halachic ruling. And it's this one down here at the bottom from Sefer HaHinuch. Even with someone pursued, that's Han, who's fleeing the pursuer, that's Greedo, and breaks vessels, in other words, causes damage to stuff, he's liable to pay for the damage. And even though he did not break them intentionally, rather unintentionally, and at the time that he was fleeing from the pursuer to save himself, all the more so he's liable for payment when he gave and took with his hand. What does Han say on the way out of the cantina? Sorry about the mess. Right? And he goes ahead and compensates the cantina owner for the damage done. Thank you all so much. This was a great discussion. You took this in directions I did not expect, and I feel like I learned a lot as well from you. Thanks so much for joining me and for participating in this discussion, and indulging me a little bit in my fascination with Star Wars.